everyone, and welcome back to All About Steph 1 with me, Steph. I am back in a new location. It's been a while. I've moved back into university and I'm now ready to balance content making again. So we're going to start off by talking about Lewis Hamilton achieving that record-breaking 100 wins and why this is a record that's unlikely to be broken again in the future. Reason number one is about having a car underneath you. Now, Lewis Hamilton, throughout the majority of his career, has always had a championship contending car, or at least a car that is capable of contending for wins. He spent 6 years at McLaren at the beginning of his career and then made that risky move to Mercedes, which a lot of people thought was going to fail. Regardless, the move to Mercedes definitely did work out, and Lewis Hamilton, throughout his 15 years in Formula One, has not had a single season where he has not won a race. This incredible level of consistency where you can pick up wins in every single season means you consistently have to have a car underneath you, but you also have to have the right driver in that car, which is going to be able to extract the maximum and be able to get those wins. If you look at the trajectory of Lewis Hamilton's McLaren career, it was characterized by 3, 4, 5 wins per season, and if he'd have carried on at that rate throughout his career, he definitely would not have reached this 100 victory mark. Let's look at a more recent example and talk about Max Verstappen, who is in his 7th year of Formula One and has amassed 17 victories. Now, in comparison to Lewis's 22 over a 7-year period, Max could definitely achieve that 22, and it is very similar in terms of the trajectory that Lewis was on at the beginning of his career. Now, if Max was to go and follow the trend that Lewis's career followed, then Max would need to have an extremely dominant car for the next 6 or 7 years of his career in order to be able to remain on that trend that Lewis Hamilton was on to get to 100 victories. Now, the likelihood of this happening is very slim, and this is due to my next point, which is the changes in the regulations. Hopefully, the aim is that they're going to make Formula One more competitive, and we're going to see less of these eras of domination that we've seen with Ferrari in the early 2000s or Mercedes in the 2010s. These cars are going to be much easier to follow. They are trying to minimize the amount of dirty air, which makes overtaking more possible. The time that teams are able to spend it in the wind tunnel is going to be reduced depending on how high they finish in the constructors' table. There is a budget cap being introduced, which means that the top teams with the biggest budgets are not going to be able to fabricate an advantage through monetary ways. If we look at what the regulations are aiming to do in reducing these dominant spells and improving competitiveness within the Formula One field, then it's likely we won't see another Mercedes era of domination for quite a while. I feel that once we see these changes in the regulations having an impact on Formula One in the next few years, that we're going to see a grid that's more akin to the beginning of Lewis Hamilton's career than the Mercedes era of Lewis Hamilton's career. The beginning was definitely characterized by there being more overall consistent winners rather than less consistent winners and a couple of odd ones out. If we look at 2007, there were only 4 winners throughout the entire season: Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen and Felipe Massa. But if we look in comparison to the 2020 season, we had Lewis Hamilton taking wins, Valtteri Bottas taking wins, Max Verstappen taking wins, and then a couple of odd ones out with Pierre Gasly in Monza and Sergio Perez in Sakir. It's easy for somebody like Esteban Ocon to take a victory when the 4 drivers in the 4 most competitive cars are almost taken out of the race completely, like they were at the Hungarian GP. When you take the top drivers from the top teams out of the equation, then it's a lot easier for somebody like Esteban Ocon to capitalise on that. However, going into the new regulations with everything being a lot more competitive, there might be a larger portion of teams which are able to consistently be winning, and therefore it's more difficult for the midfield teams to be able to capitalise on the losses of the top teams because there are too many top teams. But speaking of lots of teams being competitive, let's move on to the next point in terms of the amount of talent that we have on the grid. So it's all well and good to have competitive cars, but you have to have the right drivers in those cars in order to be able to maximize the points. Formula One is characterized by talking about this next generation of drivers which is coming up, which includes drivers like Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, George Russell and Lando Norris. All of these drivers are in some capacity pegged to be future world champions, so it will be really interesting to see if they have competitive packages who will end up coming out on top. And this is where I'm coming from when I say that the next few years of Formula One are going to be much more akin to 2007, 2008 Formula One, where there are lots of drivers who are potentially able to pick up victories. This means that the drivers will all have to share those wins, and we are less likely to see something like when Lewis Hamilton was picking up 9, 10, 11 wins every single year for Mercedes. That's a hypothetical situation because we have no idea which drivers or which teams are going to be competitive come 2022, but with the amount of talent that we have on the grid, it is more than realistic to say that there will be several drivers who are fighting for those wins. And speaking of drivers fighting, we're going to move on to the final point, which is all about junior teams. Now, the way that junior teams have been viewed and used has changed in Formula One. When Lewis Hamilton entered Formula One, they weren't as big of a thing, whereas now they've grown to be an extremely important part of each team's daily work. I have no doubt that if Lewis Hamilton hadn't been performing, then Mercedes would 100% have dropped him in favour of another talent on the grid. Perhaps even Max Verstappen. We know that Mercedes and Max Verstappen had talks, and Max considered joining the Mercedes Junior Academy before he ended up joining Red Bull. Charles Leclerc has signed a contract for Ferrari until the end of 2024, and it's likely that this contract will be extended even further. But if Charles Leclerc has one bad season or a couple of bad seasons, I know that Ferrari would not hesitate to drop him. We saw it with Sebastian Vettel. He had one iffy season when Charles Leclerc first came up to the team and beat him, and Ferrari thought, we need to drop this guy in favour of somebody else. The point is, all of these teams, Red Bull and Ferrari in particular, have reserves of junior drivers that they can dip into should their drivers not be performing. Max Verstappen is currently the golden boy of Red Bull, but what happens when there is a new golden boy? Sebastian Vettel was the old Red Bull golden boy, and Red Bull have to put their eggs in somebody's basket. And when Max Verstappen begins his inevitable decline, whether that be in 10 years' time or beyond, Red Bull are going to inevitably have to replace him. It's just a question of whether these drivers can keep up this level of consistency that Lewis Hamilton has been able to do, because that is what has allowed him to stay at Mercedes for so long. The fact that he consistently pulls out the results. And it's a question of whether any of the current crop of drivers who are coming up from the new generation will be able to replicate that same consistency that Lewis Hamilton has exhibited. So as I've explained throughout this video, there are many reasons as to why this record is likely to never be broken, but I do appreciate that records are made to be broken, and I would love to see somebody smash this record. There are obviously many reasons as well as to why this record could potentially be broken, starting off with the fact that the calendar keeps expanding. When Lewis Hamilton began his career, there were only 17 races in a full season of Formula One, whereas now we have 22 races in the 2021 season, which is a record-breaking number, and Formula One is aiming for 23 races in the years to come, and that could even increase to 24, 25, who knows. More races, more opportunities to pick up wins. That's the long and short of it, so it is definitely possible with the increased calendar. Also, drivers are starting from a much younger age. Max Verstappen entered Formula One at 17, Lando Norris at 19, Charles Leclerc at 20, and in comparison, Lewis Hamilton entered Formula One at 22. Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen, who are still on the grid, are both above 40, and so if drivers are starting in their teenage years, they have a long period of time, probably between 20 and 25 years, that they could potentially be driving in Formula One. But that one is a double-edged sword, because it also means that when they are coming towards the end of their career, there are more young drivers that teams are looking to promote, and so they might end up getting flushed out before they can reach that 20-year period. I've also talked on this channel about when Formula One will come to an end, and thinking that Formula One might come to an end in the way we know it right now before Lewis Hamilton's record can be broken is kind of where my thoughts are. I think this is going to take one hell of a driver to break this record and one hell of a set of circumstances. So whether we will get that before Formula One evolves into something different or completely falls apart is yet to be determined. So there are many reasons as to why this record will be broken, as to why it won't be broken, but I am going to remain on the side that it won't be broken, but I would love to hear what you guys think. So let me know down in the comments below whether you're on the side that it won't be broken or that it will be broken, and I will reply to as many of you as I can. But thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to leave this video a like if you have not already, and subscribe. Turn on that bell notification next to the subscribe button to be notified every time I upload. I'll be back to 6 p.m. on Monday, so keep an eye out on my channel. But thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!